There we go.
Hello again.
Hello again. Thanks again for your flexibility.
Oh, no worries. Did you get your coffee okay?
I sure did. It's right here with me. Hold on, let me turn on my video.
Thanks.
There we go.
Good. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sparing some time to join me, Daniel. Um, are you in BC? Is that where you live?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, is that where you live? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But you're from uh, Canada, right? Originally.
Yes, that's right.
How long have you lived in the States?
I've lived in the States on and off since 2005. So I came here for grad school at NYU
Hmm.
in 2005. And then I stayed here until 2014, moved back to Canada for a few years, and came back here 2.5 years ago.
Well, I'm also originally from Canada. I'm from a place called Deep River, which is up about an hour and a half north of Ottawa in Ontario. But
Okay.
yeah, but I've lived in the United States probably since the late '80s. Came down to work with my friend Daniel Lanois, record producer.
Oh my God. I've got both Acadie and For the Beauty of Winona right here on my record collection shelf.
Oh, really?
I had to ship away to somewhere in Europe to get the second one because it's pretty rare that vinyl. I mean, I love Lanois. I love his work on Oh Mercy by Dylan is such a great album, and
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
worked.
he's the best.
Yeah, that was one of the first albums I did with Dan. Was well, we were actually working on Acadie and a record with the Neville Brothers called Yellow Moon when Bob Dylan showed up. He was playing a show in New Orleans, and we invited him over to the studio because I think Bono had suggested that Bob, who was in a bit of a writing slump at the moment, work with someone who's a bit more of a taskmaster. So he suggested, this Lanois guy will really kick your butt, make you work hard. So, and when Bob showed up in the studio, we had recorded two of his songs for the Yellow Moon album for the Nevilles. And when we played him "God on Our Side," which is one of his great early songs, he listened to it and he goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. That's a pretty good one." And then we asked him because it's got like about 8 or 9 verses, very
Yeah,
cyclic. And we asked him if there was any. Dan was like, "Well, I was a bit worried the song was a bit long. Is there a verse we could cut out?" And Bob's typical response was, "Well, a lot of things have happened since I wrote that song. It could be longer."
that's
So,
right.
and it's
I actually quoted that song recently. Though we forgave the Germans, and now then we were friends. Though they murdered 6 millions in the ovens they fried, the Germans now too have God on their side
yeah.
in terms of Germany's support for Israel.
Well, it's Bob is right though. I mean, that song could be longer, and I mean, God, like we've had two Iraq wars, Syrian war. We've got this horrifying situation in Sudan. We've got the situation with Gaza and Israel, and somebody just posted the other day a neighborhood bully.
Listening actually put something like, oh yeah, neighborhood bully. That's the one all the Zionists love to bring up. Bob Dylan supports Israel.
Well, it depends how you read the lyrics, doesn't it? I mean,
Uh, I don't know. I feel like that song is. I mean, the Infidels album cover was taken in Jerusalem. To me, it's a pretty clear apology because it was around the time of the Lebanon War, and it's like everyone's picking on
right?
this guy who's just trying to stick up for himself.
Gotcha.
It wasn't to me that subtle, and he wasn't in a very subtle phase of his songwriting. He was just coming out of his Christian phase. So there was a kind of you know crank on the mountain shouting at people.
Well,
But that album also had Joker Man and a
there's
lot
some
of other
good
great
track.
stuff. And
Yeah, I actually, weirdly enough, I don't remember most of my dreams, but I actually dreamt last night that somehow or other I was with Bob and he was in a writing slump and he needed help. And so I was trying to inspire him to write some new songs that were kind of the times, because he sort of stopped doing that a while ago. It's more about just I'm an old blues guy now and
Yeah, I
stuff.
think "Oh
So
Mercy" was the last moment he did that, actually.
yeah, that's
You
a
know,
great
political
album.
world, everything is broken. I mean, so good. Yeah, but I mean, this is a spicy hot take, but I know his last album with Lanois was "Time Out of Mind," which everyone adores. And for me, that album was just too bathed in reverb and self-pity and mortality. Like I just to me it wasn't as alive as Oh Mercy was. And then he did Love and Theft a few years later, which to me was so much more um it had his the twinkle in his eye was back, and some
Hmm.
really fun wry um lyrics.
I think the last thing he wrote that I have to say I really liked was that Murder Most Foul, that sort of 13-minute epic.
About Kennedy.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I mean, but anyway, Bob's Bob, and he's written. I mean, God, you can't fault the guy. I mean, he's written enough great songs to last another century or two.
Yeah,
Until the next great writer comes along and his
absolutely.
stature. So, but listen,
Absolutely.
I wanted to get into some of the questions I have here, Daniel. Um, well, first of all, I was listening to some of your own music, and I have to say, the few pieces that I did hear, one was with I think your sister. It was from a
Oh,
concert a while ago. Has anyone ever compared you to Tom Lehrer? Do you know Tom Lehrer?
no, I usually get Randy Newman.
Well, Tom Lehrer was pre
Uh,
Randy,
yes, I
but
know Larry. Yeah.
but sort of a wry, satirical, but ultimately sort of fulfilling quality. So but I guess what I wanted to ask you about is because as one musician to another, um, I sort of came to this conclusion, and I'm wondering if you feel the same way, that we're in a time where music isn't enough. I had this conversation with Roger Waters recently. Well, a couple of months ago, he was on the show, and Roger's always been very political. If you've ever seen his shows, he doesn't hold back. It's all out there, and I agree with him. I think that what led you, I suppose, to cross that line from, well, I'm going to entertain people, to, like, I have to stand up and make a statement.
I guess you're referring to my sort of Instagram advocacy
Yes,
since October 7th. Yeah.
yes, yes,
Well,
absolutely.
first, I have to say I have nothing but respect for Roger Waters. He's been one of the few, you know, rock stars who's been courageous enough to stick his neck out on this issue for a long time. And I also have a personal fondness for him because he's been very supportive of my brother's journalistic work.
Mhm.
Um, he hasn't been afraid to signal boost the work of independent journalists who are doing unpopular things that don't get them mainstream favors. Um, it didn't feel like I was crossing any sort of line. It just felt like I was coming out of hiding, maybe. I didn't take myself to have much of a platform to speak from, especially not based on my role as a songwriter. I mean, my musical theater career has been mostly aspirational. Uh, the biggest award I've ever won is for most promising lyricist in American musical theater, and the language says it all. You know what promises are made to be. Um, so my merit has been recognized, but it's not like I had an audience who was like, "Oh my God, why is this entertainer speaking out?" Uh, Mostly people were following me, I would think, because I'd written a best-selling book with my dad.
Mhm.
I just felt in the moment of October 7th that I could see um, the gears of what can I say, lunacy gearing up right from the very first few hours of reacting to what was happening. I knew that Israel always loves a pretext to go into Gaza and do what it wants. It does it every few years, but this was a bigger pretext than they've ever had. So it stood to reason that there was going to be some real horrors on the way.
Mhm.
And the fact that they have the most fanatically bigoted, uh, and in many cases outright genocidal government in power that they've ever had was another reason. I grew up very engaged with this issue. I had an anti-Zionist father who sent me to a Zionist summer camp, which created all kinds of complexes. Um, but I grew up learning a lot about it from a lot of different angles and reading Chomsky in my teens and kind of really wanting to uh, understand as much about it as I could. In my adult life, I took a step back from being involved with it, and I became just sort of a social media consumer or a news consumer who would keep tabs on it and burnish my opinions and be right about it, but not really doing anything except posting. Um, and posting on Facebook to my friend group, very insular. And on October 8th, I just had this sense that I might have something to say about it that could be useful to some people because I could see there was a lot of confusion. I could see that, number one, um, it stood to reason that a lot of people would be very confused about where did this event come from? Like, how could this happen? And I knew that the spokespeople of the Israeli regime and largely the mainstream media that are stenographers for their point of view, mostly, were going to be out in spades giving their version of events.
Right.
And I knew that people would find those who didn't find it compelling would find it off-putting, but still confusing in a way that might induce them to tune out. A lot of people have shrugged their shoulders about this issue because it's so damn uncomfortable. There's no other foreign policy issue that's as uh, yoked to domestic, cultural, ethno-religious, emotional powder kegs as this one. I think that's safe to say. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's tied to the age-old Jewish question. Whenever the Jews are involved, whenever we're involved, it's like everyone's polarized, and it's like another flashpoint. And in this case, now we have this country that many of us root for and identify with, and that our government supports to the hilt. Anyway, I'm kind of spinning off here, but the point is, I knew that it's complex, but I knew that it's less complex than people think, or that I
Yes.
might have a perspective on it that would be clarifying, crystallizing, and allow people to look at it in a way that makes what's happening make sense, which I think is necessary. It's the prerequisite for doing anything about anything. You have to have a clear picture of it. You have to have an analysis, and I wanted to provide an analysis. But also, I think I just wanted to provide a framework in which people could feel less crazy for seeing what they're seeing.
Well, you've been doing an excellent job of it, Daniel. I must commend you for your clarity. Um, you know, um, one of the I've had a variety of responses to my own um, public opinions on the subject. One is, "You're not a Jew. Stay out of it. It's none of your damn business."
Mm-hmm.
I've had that told to me. Um, I've also,
Imagine them saying that. Imagine that saying that to someone who was like trying to raise awareness of the Holocaust during the 40s. You're not Jewish. Stop advocating for us.
well, that's yes. I mean, that's the obvious response, but the thing that I get is, well, you haven't been to Israel, you don't understand. If you were here, you would know what's going on. The other response that I often get is, oh, it's just really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I disagree with that. I don't think it's that complicated. And perhaps you could tell me why that may be the case.
Well, here's the problem. It is complicated, but not in the ways they want you to think.
Well, that's
And
kind of, yeah.
and that's and it's actually the proof of that is in the fact that when they want it to be very simple, they make it very simple. So you
They
listen to
being the
they being
establishment.
people who advance the Israeli version of events, the Hasbara machine, which is just the Hebrew word for explanation or propaganda, which is a literal industry in Israeli society, um, uh, and the mainstream media, and yeah, people who are advancing the Zionist perspective. I mean, at its heart, their version of events is not complicated or complex or nuanced. It's a bedtime story.
Hmm.
You know, the Jews used to live here 3,000 years ago, and then we were kicked out, and all of us were dispersed everywhere, and we were miserable for 3,000 years, and then decided finally we'd had enough, and they almost wiped us out, but miraculously, from the ashes of the Holocaust, Israel arose, and now it's the only safe place for Jews, and anyone who thinks that Israel was a bad idea or thinks that Israel should be beholden to some kind of universal principles or laws, or that yeah, that anyone who might have a grievance with how Israel was created or what it was predicated on is a bigoted anti-Semite. Good night, kids. How complicated is that? So when they want it to be simple, and take October 7th, you know, you had this Israeli government spokesperson who's since been fired, Elon Levy, going on British news and basically threatening an anchor who was asking him about, well, what about October 6th? What about October 5th? He said, I would warn you very strongly, do not try to contextualize October 7th. So to him, it's not complicated. There's evildoers and there's the good ones, and that's us.
Mhm.
And therefore, what are we supposed to do? So that's number one. On the premises of the claim that it's complicated, it doesn't even stand up to scrutiny, because withstand scrutiny, I should say, because these people don't believe it's complicated. They have a very simplistic view of it.
Well, it's a bit like the old Civil War saying, back in the day, it was like either you're first or you're Guinness,
Exactly.
you know?
Well, which was revived by Bush. Either you're with the terrorists or you're with us, right?
Yeah.
And Israel dutifully and predictably tried to turn October 7th into their 9/11.
Mm.
And the parallel is that for a couple of days they actually had world sympathy until they used it in the way that the American government used 9/11 to try and terrorize its own population into justifying and manufacturing consent for an unjustifiable 20-year disastrous, horrific mass murder and terror campaign all over the world of innocent people. Um, so that's one thing. There are complicated aspects to it. The history of Zionism is complicated. It's
Yes.
complicated. It's
Yes, I know.
complicated by the fact that not all Jews are Zionists. It's complicated by the fact that Zionists were responding to real incidents and waves of anti Semitism in Europe. It's complicated by the fact that not all Jews are European derived, and that not all adversity Jews have faced is of the same kind as European anti Semitism, Christian anti Semitism. You know, that the Jews of the East, who are called Mizrahi Jews today, or Arab Jews, or Sephardic Jews, or whatever you want to call them, had a very different history over the last 3,000 years. They were Arabic speaking, they were living among the countries they were living in, they were deeply woven up in the culture and the communities they lived in. And yet things weren't perfect either. So that's complicated. And then the way Israel treated them when they migrated in droves to Israel after expulsions or whatever in the 50s from Arab countries, and very much turned them into second class citizens. That's complicated. The history of the Palestinian resistance is complicated. The interaction between secular and Islamist elements is complicated. All kinds of complications. The UN is a complicated thing. The US, whatever. So there's lots of details one could know. But
Well,
the premise
eh,
in what people are saying to you is it's too complicated for you to see the big picture.
right.
And that if you don't understand all these nuances, there's nothing you can understand about it. And that's just false.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I just meant to add the other thing that makes it very complicated. And the reason I know about this is because my wife is she's Australian, but her family was a Pentecostal Christian family, very, very strict. And I didn't have a clue about this sort of end times Christian right sort of idea of this collaboration, literally between, sort of unholy alliance between the Christian right and the Zionist APAC Jewish lobby in this country, which, even though they don't, like, they wouldn't necessarily say hello to each other or passing each other on the street, metaphorically speaking, they have a shared mutual interest, you see, because the Christian right, the sort of Pentecostal end times believes that the second coming can only occur once all the children of Israel are back, in Israel. So they
That's
have
right.
this bizarre, almost mythological death wish kind of approach to the thing, and that's something that's, leaves most people sort of baffled, but that's, not, I hate to talk about this stupid guy Trump, but his sleight of hand, his magic trick was to get the support of both the Israel lobby and the Christian right, which is probably the
Well,
only way you get elected in this country.
but that's not such a hard trick to pull off. Israel loves the Christian right,
Right.
and APAC loves the Christian right, and because it's really not about Jewish safety, it's about support for a foreign imperial buddy, and that, neoconservatives are their own kind of fanatics, that the US should be the hegemon, and Israel has played a crucial role in that. Joe Biden himself in the 1980s said, and quite frankly, Donald Trump doesn't disgust me any more than Joe Biden does at this point.
Yeah, I'm not
I
picking
I
sides here either, by
yeah,
the way. I'm a Jill Stein supporter, but
very good. So Joe Biden said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. It's the best multi-billion-dollar investment we've ever made.
second best to Ukraine.
So, well, this is back in the 80s.
But
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
a
I know what
legit
you're
brand,
saying. Yeah, yeah, sure.
you know.
But I don't know. But he's less conditional when it comes to Israel than he is to Ukraine. He's got more unconditional love for Israel. He feigns, oh, there's a red line, but then he'll say there's no red line, and his dementia helps with that inconsistency because it's a nice it's a nice alibi. But anyway, back to the question of simplicity versus complexity. Uh, there are plenty of things that are complex, and if one wants to delve into the complexity of them, one can. I'm moderately versed in the complexities. I'm by no means an expert, but this is true of anything.
Sure.
People want to
The Holocaust was
mystify this
complex.
particular. Sure, it was right, but was there something simple about it? Yes. 6 million Jews, half of the Europe's Jews were wiped out. Yiddish culture was almost
Destroyed.
entirely functionally destroyed,
Mm-hmm.
and the world was changed forever. Okay, well, if we're going to grant Palestinians the same degree of humanity that we would like granted to ourselves, and this is really the fundamental dividing line, this is the simple thing. Do you think Palestinians are human beings? If they're human beings, then they have their own interiority, their own subjectivity, and their own perspective, their own relationship to history, their own memories, their own ties to land, and they have human rights, inalienable human rights. So, what happened to them? And when you start to answer the question of what happened to them without recourse to, oh, well, but no, it was someone else's fault and the Grand Mufti and they rejected this. No, these are all red herrings.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very simple summation or synopsis you can draw that is historically accurate, with even acknowledging that there are complications that one could get into. And the best Israeli historians like Ilan Pape and Benny Morris, before he did his heel turn to to being an apologist for this stuff, documented that there was a determined, concerted plan among Zionists, not all Zionists, but the ones who ended up prevailing, which was that we white Europeans of a certain ethnic group want and deserve a place of our own, you know. Uh,
What's
we
wrong
have
with
chosen this.
what's
What's
wrong
that?
with what's wrong with Crown Heights?
I'm living just on the other side of Atlantic Avenue from it, and it looks fine. I don't go there alone, but Uh,
And then you
I'm
can
in
always go to
Bed-Stuy.
Florida in the winter, you know, like,
Sure, exactly. Um, well, they Herzl considered Uganda. Theodore Herzl didn't care about Palestine. Could have been anywhere. They looked at South America, Uganda, but they chose Palestine, and they knowingly, and they spoke about it this way: we're going to colonize this place. We're going to settle this place. We're going to take this place, and we have to take it. Why? Because there's another people living there. If not another people, then there are other people living there. Whether they acknowledge them as a nation or not doesn't matter. There are people who are living there with a connection to that land for thousands of years, or at least hundreds, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and they will rightly resist our incursion. So we're going to have to prevail, and then we're going to have to do something about the demographics. This was understood by all the political Zionists, from the so-called left of David Ben-Gurion to the right wing of Vladimir Jabotinsky. They were very overt about it. Some were more public about it than others,
hmm.
but in private, they all acknowledged this was the plan. The plan was drawn up. They were waiting for the right pretext. And then, due to a whole lot of complicating factors around 1947-48, that the moment came, they executed it. And the effect on the Palestinians was 750,000 of them lost their land, were kicked out or massacred,
We're discussing
expelled.
the Nakba, correct?
This is the Nakba, and this is the Nakba, which is a word you're not allowed to say in Israel. You're actually not allowed to teach about it. And I never heard it growing up, going to Zionist summer camp, until
I,
I was about 20.
I can't say I ever heard the word until I started digging deeper into this whole
That's right.
subject, 10 years ago.
And which, so much for, you know, abhorring Holocaust denial. We only abhor the denial of our genocide. But what about those calamities that have happened to other people? What about the Armenians? What about the Palestinians?
Well,
So yeah,
sorry, just to go get a little closer to home. I mean, um, there's really no difference in my mind to the white colonial settler project that is Israel, as to what European, Western Europe, white Europeans did to the Native Americans of this continent. Oops, they're in the way. They need to go because we have this plan and you're not part of it. And we're still living with that consequence in North America. I mean, that by some estimations, we're talking 100 million people were wiped out over the course of several hundred years. And the parallels to me, in my mind, are very similar between,
there are parallels. There are parallels, and there are also important differences. One of them being that, for all intents and purposes, and again, I'm not a historian here, so anything I say, I might be really reaching, but this is just to my lay mind.
hmm,
The North American European colonists, white colonists, more or less finished the job. I mean, we did conquer, not we. I wasn't here. My people were back in Hungary, you know, living in the shtetl or whatever. But the white power structure here did consolidate its power, from not just from the river to the sea, but from the sea to the sea.
mhm.
you know, from every sea to every sea, um, and more or less ended any kind of indigenous uh, nationhood. Now, not completely, which is why we have land back movements now, and the American Indian movement in the 60s and 70s, and why there's truth and reconciliation, or at least pageantry of that, happening in Canada now, with all the
Hmm.
land acknowledgements and things like that. We didn't wipe them all out, but we laid them very, very, very low, to the point where we could, and again, I'm saying we in quotation marks, we essentially destroyed or put into a coma their culture, and now it's being resurrected, and it never completely died, but it was a very effective extermination. Maybe not total, but very effective.
Well, culturally,
The
when you take a,
Zionists take over. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that, culturally, when you take away people's connection to the land, you take away their connections to anything, because especially with indigenous culture, I mean, it's there's an old saying, ask not what Mother Earth can do for you, but what you can do for Mother Earth. And that's a complete reversal of Western dominance and the
Yeah.
mentality that
Another way of saying that is that the Western mentality, land belongs to us, and in the indigenous mentality, we belong to the land. And
precisely.
anytime I've interacted with Palestinian culture, lyrics, poetry, anything like that, it's so clear that their mindset about the land is that they belong to it and they owe it something and it wants something from them, which is a very different way of looking at it than the European one. Um, but yes, on the North American continent, uh, the settler colonial genocidal project was at least 95% effective, you know? And so the chickens coming home to roost are that Malcolm X spoke about are very few and far between for us. There's very few things we have to deal with outside of sort of our guilty consciences and a sense of morality and trying to square things with our sense of ourselves as liberals, those of us who find ourselves on that side of the train track. In Israel Palestine, they kicked out 750 people, sorry, 750,000 people, I should say, created a huge refugee crisis outside of their borders. But there was no final solution. And that's why you have Israeli leaders now talking in very Nazi like terms. They want this over with already. When are
Yes.
these Palestinians just going to go away and leave us alone? Now, inside the Zionist mindset, you've got the liberal Zionist mindset that says, well, why can't we, let's negotiate with them and give them some shitty deal so that they'll go away and leave us alone. And but the much more honest view actually is that of the right wing, which is why don't we just wipe them out? I mean, it's just much more straightforward.
Mm.
Why can't we do what they did in North America? Why don't we get to have a total victory?
Or why
And
can't
that's why October 7th, yeah, do we get the win this time, as Rambo said, you know? So it's like they're looking for they were looking for a pretext to get this done once and for all. And you've seen Israeli culture really metastasize to the point where there's a lot of rhetorical, at least, support for a wiping out of this quote unquote Gaza problem. And the Gaza problem is not a Gaza problem. It's a problem of 1948. We did this to these people, and they won't go away about it, and they won't forget about it, and they won't give up on their memories of it.
let's talk briefly. I've got a few more questions I want to make sure I get to, but let's talk briefly about the divisions within the Jewish community. For example, I've had two separate guests on this show over the past few months. One of whom is a fellow by the name of Rabbi Dovid Feldman. I don't know if you're familiar with Dovid Feldman. He's an Orthodox Jew. He lives in somewhere in Westchester or someplace, but he's one of those Orthodox Jews that you will see showing up at pro-Palestinian rallies wearing a Palestinian flag,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
but wearing the traditional Hasidic garb. And he's a student of Rabbi Weiss, who was an anti-Zionist back in the 30s, who apparently had his mind changed. But nonetheless, Rabbi Weiss said to me, why would I want to live in Israel? It's not a, it's like the least safe place in the world for Jews. Everybody's got guns and everyone's trying to kill us, you know. And then on the
Including the
other,
Israeli police, who with no compunction will beat up ultra Orthodox people in Jerusalem who are anti-Zionists.
oh
I
yes,
mean, they're brutal with them.
I've seen tape video of it. And then on the other hand, I have a friend of mine who, you know, is also from Canada, and he's a settler, and he lives in Tiberias, which is, you know, near the Sea of Galilee. And his conversation is, well, one of my favorite quotes of his was, the difference between the Holocaust and what happened to us then and now is now we have an 800,000 person strong army, and we're never going to deal with it again. And this time we're going to make it. You know, I mean, that's, it's kind of referring back to the Zionist idea that you referred to. But so you have, and then then you've got secular Jews, millions and millions and millions of them, who are like, as David Feldman said, just because you're a Jew doesn't make you automatically speak Hebrew. And it doesn't mean that you have any connection to Israel whatsoever.
But there's actually a corollary to that. Just because you speak Hebrew and live in Israel doesn't mean you're religiously Jewish.
That
Most
too.
of Israel is completely secular. In fact,
Yes.
I'm reading a history right now of the Jews of Kurdistan who moved to many of them moved to Israel in the 50s when Jews were being kicked out of Iraq,
Mhm.
post the creation of Israel after thousands of years of more or less peaceful coexistence. And they got to Israel and they were shocked. They had been imagining the promised land and Jewish devotional connection to Jerusalem, and they got this little American outpost in the Middle East, this completely heathen strip mall culture where they were second class citizens to the white European Ashkenazi
I
Jews.
think the same thing
So,
happened with the Ethiopian Jews that have.
well, yeah, absolutely, and worse, and the Yemenite Jews. I mean, and there was kidnapping of babies and sterilizations and being sprayed with pesticides and being relegated to shitty development towns on the border. So anyway, it's just like you said that just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you have a connection to Israel. Just because you have a connection to Israel doesn't mean you're particularly Jewish in the traditional sense of giving, like making Jewish tradition part of your life. Israeliness has become the new Jewishness for a lot of people. Zionism has become the new uh, Judaism. And
Mhm.
that's very scary when a political ideology takes on the character and tenor of and fervency and imperviousness to evidence of a religion.
Well,
What you've
religion
got is
never
a
had anything to do with evidence, did it?
well, that's right. But at
Sorry to
least
say that to
religion
any
is
religious people, but
right. But at least religion, at its best, actually does supply our souls with something that's
true,
ineffable
true,
and is
true.
connected to
Sorry.
something beyond this world. But politics is of this world.
Yeah,
And when you start mixing those two, you get very dangerous things. In fact, Zionists love to crow about the dangers of Islamic fundamentalism. Well, they're just projecting because that's what Zionism is. It's Jewish fundamentalism, um, Jewish ethno supremacist fundamentalism at its core. Uh, so you're asking about the divisions within the Jewish community. I didn't let you get to your question, but
well, let
there was
me.
one of the little complications I couldn't resist
No, no, no.
pointing out.
Hey, um, no, I suppose to be more to put more of a point on it. I suppose as a are you a secular Jew, or do you practice religious
I don't
practices,
practice
or
religion.
more?
No, I grew up quite secular. I had a bar mitzvah, a kind of pro forma ceremony that a lot of Jews, whether they're religious or not, have to sort of tick off the box and connect themselves to the community.
Right.
But it's not particularly there's nothing's at stake spiritually when you have a bar mitzvah. Really, no, it's pageantry.
But you don't read the Torah every day or
You
anything
do
like
read
that.
the Torah, but
Oh, you do.
when you're that one day, no, no, no,
No, I
as a
mean
bar
on a.
mitzvah kid, but I don't. No, no, no.
Oh,
And I haven't been in, and I've opted out of most Jewish spaces for a long time. Of late, um, I've been opening my mind up a little more and my heart up to could I have more of a connection to this tradition, but it's still a fraught thing for me. Um, and I think there's a lot of Holocaust survivors where the lineage of that was a kind of rejection of Jewish tradition. I mean, my grandmother's father, I think, in Budapest was a cantor. I mean, one of the most famous rabbinical, sorry, liturgical singers in the country. Deeply devotional and deeply spiritual. But I think a lot of Jews lost God. There's a God-shaped hole in our culture
mm,
since the Holocaust, and I think American Jewish culture, which is mostly Ashkenazi, stand-up comedy, self-deprecation, neurosis, all of that is predicated on a
so you're
kind of
talking about Woody Allen here.
he's the the creme de la creme of that. And then you got Jerry Seinfeld, who's like Woody Allen without the Jewishness. Like there's no explicit Jewishness anymore. Now it's just a personality quirk, and then it becomes mainstream.
Or Larry
Uh,
David.
or Larry David, good example. You know, so no, I am not a practicing Jew, but I am, I guess, I would say Judaism curious at this point in my life because I am feeling that a lack of spirituality in one's life is a pretty consequential lack. And having dabbled in a few other traditions, the question has just arisen for me of late due to a few factors. Well, what might my own tradition have to offer me? So I'm in a
Well,
moment of exploration, I'd say.
I have quite a number of, I live up in near Woodstock, New York, which is kind of hippie town. I have a lot of older Jewish friends who have turned to Buddhism actually as a form
Sure,
of
Jubus.
spiritual. Yeah, exactly. But I guess where I was going with the question was, have you experienced much in the way of hostility towards yourself from the Jewish community that is sort of saying, well, whose side are you really on? Like, are you a traitor to your own people, or what's do you get much of that, or
Yeah, well, so there are people who are much more closely tied to the Jewish community who have a lot more to lose than I do. Someone like Peter Beinart, for instance, who's a practicing Jew and has never cut himself off from Jewish organizations and Jewish spaces and is standing up for Palestine and is for a one-state solution and is against this genocide. Someone like him is going to be getting a level of hatred that I can't even imagine. Like I said, I had an anti-Zionist father who was pretty prominent in the Canadian Jewish community as sort of a villain, as sort of a pariah, and I had my rabbi telling me at age 12, listen, your father's a great man, but don't listen to a word he says about Israel. He's a goddamn traitor. Uh, Not in those words, but that was basically the message. I had to I was expected to split my identity somehow. And I never did because I just could see that he was right because the way that these people were acting to try and boycott him and silence him and just the energy of justifying a military occupation, just to me that the contradiction between that and my pacifist or socialist or whatever values, proto values I had at that time was just too glaring. And then in my adult life, I've kind of stayed away from Jewish spaces. I certainly like to think of myself as culturally Jewish in the same way that Woody Allen does, uh, or did. But it's not like when October 7th came, I had a big choice to make of, oh my God, okay, how am I going to face the people at the synagogue meeting? I don't go to synagogue. I have a friend who's the president of her synagogue in Western Canada. She's dealing with something right now. Now, she's less radical than I am, but she's dealing with the question of are we going to take on the whatever that definition of anti-Semitism is that equates it with anti-Zionism? Are we going
yeah?
to officially take that on? She's standing up against that and having community members rail at her for being, you know, disloyal or worse. So now, have I gotten hatred online? Yes, but that's what
Kind of,
happens online.
yeah, it's
You
kind of
get
where I was.
hatred. Yeah, I've gotten messages from people calling me a capo. They love to call you a capo, which is the word for
KAPO, yes.
KAPO. Yeah, not a capo like the thing you put on your guitar. Uh, like the Jews who
The
were
thugs.
induced by the Nazis to collaborate with them in the Holocaust, which itself to me is an interesting accusation. You're going to victim blame. You're going to hate the Jews who, through no lack of love for their own people, but out of circumstance were compromised, into collaborating. Okay, that's fine. But that's not what's happening here. But they love to throw that around. They love to throw that around. Um,
Well, yeah, I
and you
mean,
have, and then I have people who are just bewildered. How can you take this position against your own people? But it doesn't hit me like, oh, there are people who are dealing with this within their own families. Before you and I spoke, I was just having a conversation on the phone with someone in Canada who's dealing with a father, it's a woman in her 30s with kids, and a prominent Jewish family, and a father who has recently discovered that she harbors some sympathies towards the Palestinians and harbors some doubts about whether Israel is the best idea for Jews, and listens to my podcast, Bad Hasbara, you know, which satirizes Israeli propaganda. And he's basically told her, you can choose that or you can choose this family.
oh
And
my
you
good
must
lord.
report to me on any alternative media you watch and allow me to vet it. Kind of a tyrannical mind control thing. And it's a hysterical reaction and a tyrannical one, which bespeaks a deep insecurity that we're losing the monopoly on the story here. And I'm losing the daughter I thought I had, and I'm losing my grip on reality. And I wrote a song about this in 1997 when I was at summer camp as a counselor and tried to insert 3 minutes of Nakba content into a special day dedicated to the creation of the state of Israel, a very heroic telling of that story. And I wanted at the very end to put in a little drop of an alternate perspective just for soberness, you know?
Mm.
And I did. And I got such pushback from some of the Zionist colleagues of mine, on colleagues, you know, fellow counselors. And I wrote a song, and the opening line was, "You can feel it crumbling, your hold on what you've known and what you've needed to be true. And now I see you stumbling through sentences that break apart and reveal the rift inside of you." And that was happening then. It was nascent then, but it's happening in full view of everybody right now. And there are people who are caught in the maelstrom of that way more than I am. My family pretty much agrees with me. I have very little to lose by speaking out about it. So I
Mm.
just, I balk at sort of complaining about the cost to me. I don't know. Maybe the musical theater industry will shun me from now on. I have no idea. But so far, I haven't faced any material consequences.
Um, well, another of my questions here on my list is, for example, I think the Met Gala was just recently, like sometime
Yeah,
this week.
yeah. I'm
And
sorry I
again,
missed it.
yeah, me too.
I couldn't. I would have
Gosh
gone, but I
darn.
couldn't find anything to wear. You know.
Yeah. Uh, going back to a conversation that, as I said, I had with Roger Waters a few months ago, and he mentioned because I said to him, you've obviously paid somewhat of a price for your support of the Palestinian cause and being so outspoken, although his fans still love him. But he's constantly being badgered and sued and everything else. And and he said to me, I have conversations with friends who are also musicians and maybe not of his stature. He's obviously Pink Floyd. He can't. He's up in a certain stratosphere because of that. But um, he's had conversations with other musicians who are like, well, I'd like to do something, I'd like to say something, and privately I'm fully in support of what you're saying, but publicly I just can't do that because I'll lose my position as an A&R person with Columbia Records, or my little piece of the pie is going to be diminished. Why? I mean, it just seems like there's, generally speaking, in the entertainment industry, a real veil of silence about this whole subject, with the exception of people like Macklemore, who just wrote this fantastic track called Hall.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, you've got a guy like Bono who's made a bloody career of waving peace signs and flags, and he's mute. I mean, he was fine to go over to Ukraine and arm wrestle with Zelensky, but when it comes to this situation, it's like
Oh, he's
that.
worse than mute. He was worse than mute. There was a video of him sometime in October, U2 playing in Las Vegas, and he dedicated one of their early songs. I don't know if it was Sunday Bloody Sunday or New Year's Day or just one of these early, like back when U2 was an actual,
Yeah,
you
good
know,
band.
a good band, and with sort of punk sensibilities, um, speaking up about Irish resistance and things like that. They changed some of the lyrics to be about like the beautiful Israeli teenagers dancing at the Nova Music
Oh,
Festival,
jeez.
being slaughtered, and he made this big speech about it, and the genocide had already started. Now it's one thing if you want to like dedicate the song to all the victims of violence, if you want to both sides it and all of that, but to basically turn one of your protest songs into this sentimental uh, uh, tribute to the victims of the occupying power, which basically serves as it's a shame of what's going to happen as a result of this. But what are you going to do? Look at what these barbarians did to our beautiful white teenagers. Um, it's worse than being mute. And what the thing that drives me crazy is that everything you said is true. It's obviously true. You talk to anyone in entertainment, and it's true. I've talked to Hollywood actors. I've talked to uh, uh, I spent some time talking to Susan Sarandon, who faced the consequence
Yes.
and she's got clout. She's an Oscar winner, and she couldn't withstand speaking for 5 minutes at a Palestinian rally without being dumped by her own talent agency. And I've spoken to
Yeah.
people with a lot less clout than her, and everyone knows there's a veil of silence. But you know what we're not supposed to say? Zionists control Hollywood. Zionists control the music industry, because that sounds anti-Semitic. You know, well,
Well,
the thing that pisses me off the most is when we demand that the world uh, see through anti-Semitic stereotypes while completely acting out anti-Semitic stereotypes ourselves.
mm,
At a certain point, stop feeding ammunition to people who irrationally hate Jews by giving people reason to rationally resent the behavior of actual Jews. I mean, we're human beings. Our actions have consequences. Our behavior, our demeanor has consequences. And the thing that people can't get their heads around is that there's this history of irrational resentment and hatred and persecution of Jews. Therefore, anytime anyone dislikes what a Jew does or speaks out against what a country calling itself the Jewish state does, it must be irrational. No, that's not true. That's not true. And I I just think it's a basic moral precept that you don't get to opt out of moral accountability with by appeal to everyone has always hate us. You must just hate me for irrational reasons.
right. No, I've heard that.
Now I don't want to live in a world where people irrationally hate Jews. And I think there are people who were anti-Semites before October 7th who will cynically use this stuff and if any of them are listening, um, you know, get out of here with that. Like like I'm not interested in people using Israel's actions to justify hating Jewish people. That's buying into Zionist logic. In fact, Zionism is the biggest purveyor of and consumer of anti-Semitism in the world. Israel
I'm glad you
thrives on
I'm
anti-Semitism.
glad you said that because I
Yeah.
said that and a friend of mine who is Jewish was very upset by my statement.
Well,
Uh,
I'm happy to be your token on that one.
well, he was also upset because I'd sent him a link to a Max Blumenthal video, and he said,
Oh,
"Oh,
Max says it better than I can. I mean, that guy is crystal clear.
you know." Um, I have two more questions, and then I'm going to let you
Sure.
go. Uh, First of all, looking at things from the long lens of history, looking down, how do you think? I mean, I know how we judge people, say, for example, in the 30s and 40s who knew what was happening with the Holocaust but didn't say anything, Germans and not non-Germans. How do you think history will judge what's happening right now, say, in that perspective?
I don't know. I mean, how am I supposed to answer that? That kind of question.
Well,
Not that it's a bad, not that it's a bad question, but the thing that immediately occurs to me is whatever I say is just going to be me projecting my current opinion into the future. So it's basically what I'd be saying is history will judge that I was right and they were all wrong. I mean, how else am I supposed to answer that? That I think that history will see that. Um, yeah, let me give me a more thoughtful answer to that. I think history will see that humanity, or at least Western culture, learned entirely the wrong lessons from the Holocaust, that the Holocaust was exploited, uh, not for the benefit of transforming humanity, but for the purposes of just shifting the balance of power to who gets to do the oppressing. I think history will judge that the Palestinian people are the most forsaken uh, and betrayed uh, and ignored people are among them, um, and that the question of Jewish suffering has been used as a weapon to launder, erase, justify, and perpetuate Palestinian suffering. And I think history will judge that, in fact, neither of these sufferings is better or worse than the other. And that I think history will also judge that Zionism was among the most calamitous things to ever happen to the Jewish people. And I don't just mean that it'll end up in the killing of many Jews, although it could end up in a bloodbath. It really could. I think it's as the rabbi you mentioned said, it's a mortal danger to Jewish safety actually when it pretends to be the opposite. But time will tell. I'm not wishing for a bloodbath, but I could see it happening. I could see Israeli society crumbling from the inside. I could see a civil war. I could see the balance of power shifting in the world and the US no longer being able to play Godfather and Israel getting smashed.
Mhm.
Any number of things could happen. But I mean calamitous to what's happened to Jews on the inside and how we treat each other. Like this family I described, you know, families being ripped apart over allegiance to a nation state,
Mhm.
to an army,
Or an ideology of some
or
sort.
an ideology. It's one thing to be Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof saying, no, there is no other hand. I can't forgive my daughter for marrying a non Jew. Okay, fine. You know, there's a tribal, that's sort of an archetypical
Hey,
human thing.
it's like an Irishman saying Protestant saying you can't marry a
Absolutely.
Catholic or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This has been a sort of a human dilemma. It's Romeo and Juliet, right?
Right.
We can understand that, but this is something else. And I forgot where I was going with that, or even what I was answering. But just the tragedy of, oh yeah, and the being cut off from our own hearts. Uh, the just the amount of cognitive dissonance one has to cope with if one's going to hold on to an attachment to this nation state, this militarized, racist, bigoted, spiritually bereft, religiously extremist, uh, and worsening by the day nation state, and to put our faith in that and our sense of security and identity in that, that's not good for us, man. That's not
Mhm,
good for
mhm.
the soul. And that's not good for a sense of Jewishness that I would want to be a part of. And I don't think it's in line with what our teachings tell us at all. And I've heard it said that you can end in exile physically, but remain in exile emotionally and spiritually. And I don't think Jews are any more at home because there's now a Jewish homeland. I think quite the opposite, actually. And I think
Yeah.
there's actually a lot of hatred and jealousy of the Palestinians who are at home in their hearts, in their homeland. It really is, they do belong to it.
That's an interesting
So
point. Yes.
Zionism is this panacea that doesn't work, and it's
Mhm.
this fake solution, or this shiny looking solution to our age old problem of not belonging anywhere. But I think history is gonna look back and say this was a disaster.
Well, as Rabbi David Feldman told me, and of course, people will disagree. Even people who studied the Torah and the Talmud will disagree. But in his interpretation, is that when the Jewish people were expelled by the Egyptians back, 3,000 years ago, the whole purpose was to go out into the world to bring the teachings, this positive perspective that can be found, of course, spiritually and morally speaking, into the world. And it's not the purpose to have a homeland anymore. That's the discrepancy that I've encountered. That the
Yeah,
whole very idea of a nation state is antithetical. You see.
yeah, it is, and that's why the religious Jews say that when the Messiah comes, that'll be the sign that we're supposed to return, but not until then, and we're not supposed to accelerate that process artificially. Look, it's a question of how you respond to trauma, as we write about in the book I wrote with my father, The Myth of
Mm-hmm.
Normal. Trauma is not what happens to you; it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. And what's had happened inside of the Zionist mind is to say, "Well, fuck that. Fuck that waiting around for safety. we're it's us against the world. Only we can support ourselves with the help of billions of dollars a year from the U.S. And the Christian Zionists. We've got to take matters into our own hands. If you can't beat them, join them. Basically,
Mhm,
well, that's
mhm.
one approach to suffering. And I completely look. I'm the grandson, great grandson of Holocaust victims. Uh, it's unimaginable what happened there. But Zionism started a long time before the Holocaust.
Oh
It
yes.
was fundamentally an assimilationist response to a kind of internalized, I think, self-loathing of the anti-Semites are right. We don't belong here. We're weird. We're and it's shameful to be on the outs. And for centuries, all over the world, Jews were able to be where they were, but not be of where they were. To be in the world but not of it. And and that was kind of an exalted place, I think, or at least a place that we could find some meaning and provide some meaning to the rest of humanity. And
I
look at
f-
all the contributions Jews have made.
I find it highly admirable, the notion of being in the world, not of the world. I mean, that's something I think you and I probably both strive for as artists.
That's right.
Why not? I mean, that would make perfect sense.
And that capacity for that, I credit partly to my sense of connection to a lineage of that, and that's part of the Jewish tradition and identity that I choose to align myself with. And anything that says no, that my Jewishness is tied to a place or an army or a prevailing opinion among that I'm supposed to conform to among the majority of my people, to me that's just deeply unkosher.
Well, as Groucho Marx said, I wouldn't want to be part of any club that would have me. I'm going to leave you with one last. This isn't a question. Well, I was going to ask you what kind of guitar that red one, hollow, semi-hollow F double F cutaway is up on your wall there.
That's an Epiphone with a Bigsby tremolo thing on
Nice.
it.
I thought for a second it was a Guild Starfire, of which I'm a huge fan, but
Yeah.
it's a very similar guitar.
No,
Um,
that's the Epiphone. Then there you got the PR. Sorry, what is that? Sire Larry Carlton
okay,
model, and an Ibanez Iceman, and a
and
good old
Les
Gibson Les
Paul,
Paul. And I've got my Vernon Reed PRS over there.
very nice. I'm a huge fan of the old Les Paul. I've got a '72 Les Paul Gold Top, which I have probably like way too many guitars for one person, but it's the only guitar I use anymore. I mean, I could sell all the rest and be fine.
Yeah, well,
But
however it
anyway,
works.
uh, to go off because I am going to play the track selection that you'd sent me, but I was going to save that to the back of the show just because
Yeah,
for,
sure.
for copyright, like for the podcast, the music is fine, but for YouTube, you can't do it because
Yeah,
copyright issues. But
sure.
I was going to finish off by asking you. I mean, I know why the Bruce Coburn track is on your list, but let's talk about if I had a rocket launcher, some son of a bitch would die.
Yeah, well, uh, I just love Bruce Coburn, and he makes me so proud as a Canadian. And he's such a great embodiment of the best, I think, of the Canadian pop songwriting tradition because it's very literate and erudite and of the world, but with a really great pop sensibility too. Um, and I can't believe that song was on the radio when I was a kid. I mean, to me, the '80s are just the greatest era of pop music ever. That you could have that song on the radio. I think it even had some radio play in the States.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I know, and you know, protesting the Reagan government's support of the Contras and the death squads in Honduras and Guatemala. And I mean, it's just incredible. You could never see something like that. I mean, Macklemore's song is never going to get played on mainstream corporate
He
radio.
doesn't need to at this point. He's
Doesn't
got
need to because it's got a different outlet, right? But what I love about the Bruce Coburn song is, I mean, you look at Bruce Coburn, he looks like such a peaceful guy with the circular glasses, and he looks like a
mhm.
nerd.
No, he's got
Uh,
a pair of these.
yeah, those exactly.
No, but
Um,
he's a big collector of knives. Interestingly enough, he has this massive knife collection.
does he?
Yes, like all. I mean,
Wow.
that's he has them. I mean, he loves them.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
just talking about hunting knives, by the way. I'm talking.
right. That's so interesting. Uh, My favorite album of his is The Charity of Night.
Mm.
And it's just spectacular. I mean, and he's just one of the greatest guitar players ever. I mean, I just think he's so underrated. But that song, If I Had a Rocket Launcher, it's so mournful and wistful until it gets to the hook.
But it's also an expression of anger
That's what I'm
and a
saying.
sense of retaliation that
That's
often
exactly
goes
right.
unsaid.
That's right. So the verse lyrics are just describing the plight of the poor and oppressed all over the world, in the third world, the global south, the people he's talked to. When I talk to the survivors of tales too sickening to relate, and here comes the helicopter, second time today, everybody scatters and hopes it goes away. You know, he's just, it's the evidence of his own eyes. Here he is, a citizen of the world. He's not an expert in anything. He's just a person. I'm just a guy who's willing to talk to people, to step outside of my comfort zone and actually speak to people about their experience. And when I come into contact with their experience, when I see what's going on in the world, my visceral reaction is not, let's make peace. It's not, let's hope for a better world.
Well, it's
It's,
a non-fictional account. I mean, he was there. I mean, he
that's
was
exactly right.
in that camp, and he did see that, and he did feel that that American helicopter. If I had a goddamn rocket launcher, I'd shoot that fucking thing down. You know.
That's exactly right. And that's a more on the ground version of what Bob Dylan did with Masters of War, where Bob he's thinking about, pissing on the grave basically of the warmongers who sent that helicopter there. But I just love the on the groundness of If I Had a Rocket Launcher. And to me, in this moment, it speaks to how a lot of people are feeling, because we're not on the ground in Gaza, but with the live streamedness of this genocide, a lot of people are having a kind of horror by proxy,
Mhm.
and there's a sense of powerlessness. And I think that song just really speaks to, I mean, there's also it's not just it's not just defense and solidarity in the song, there's
Sense of
vengeance.
vengeance. Yes, of
I'd
course.
make somebody pay, you know it's not just I would protect these people from that helicopter, but the way it ends with some son of a bitch would die, I think it's cathartic actually to admit the hatred that rises up in us, the horror, the outrage. uh, I think in moments like this, it calls for a certain breach of politesse so that it doesn't get repressed, build up, and explode in ways that are, you know, counterproductive. But I think these are times that call for a certain degree of oomph, and that song certainly has it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great recommendation, and I've played it a few times on my show, so it's a uh, popular track. So I appreciate that, and I guess is there any sort of parting words that you'd like to share before I let you go, or I mean, there must be, I'm sure.
No, just I'm really grateful that you had me, and it's great to talk to someone who was involved in the making of some of my favorite albums. And
Well, it's also great to talk
yeah.
to someone who listened to them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Daniel. Hopefully, I don't live that far. I mean, I'm down in Brooklyn quite often, so maybe we can rendezvous at some point and share a coffee or something, and
Or jam a little.
or jam. There you go. That would be even better. Absolutely. I play keyboards mostly, so I see there's a piano in the background. So
That's right. Yeah. Good.
is that a
Okay.
stat an upright?
It's an upright. Yeah, it's a Johannes Seiler, which is
Oh,
a German model I didn't know of, but yeah, it's done well. And there are a couple of, you recognize those guys in the paintings?
well, that's Julian up there, of course.
No, it's not Julian Assange.
Oh, I thought it was Julian Assange.
No, that's Walter Becker and Donald Fagen.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. Even
Yeah,
better. Well, not even better. Speaking of Julian, uh, on the 20th, I guess they're going to be coming out with the verdict in the British courts.
yeah,
And that's another subject that gets very overshadowed in all of this conversation about what's currently going on is the vast importance of his case and the
absolutely.
inhumanity and the threat to free speech and journalism that.
Yeah, well, my brother Aaron would be a far better person to speak about that than I am. Himself being an independent journalist and covering this stuff very closely.
But we should always keep that in our thoughts. All right, Daniel, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. And we'll be seeing you when, as they say in Australia, see you when I see you.
And as they probably say in Australia when I come around, "G'day, mate."
G'day, Mate. G'day, Mate. All right.
Malcolm, thanks. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Cheers. Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Goodbye.